Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, OnScreen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to OnScreen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today we are going to be talking about Pluto. This is the anime on Netflix. It's a new anime series that you should check out if you haven't already, and then come back and listen to the rest of this podcast. Because when we get to Pluto, we're going to be discussing it in full spoilers during our full spoilers segment. Besides that, though, we have some stuff to look forward to on the horizon, and a few news stories and trailers to cover in On Beat. Let's get started, though, with our On the Horizon segment.
On the horizon.
On the Horizon is where we talk about stuff coming up in the next week or so. So last time we did this podcast, I made a mistake because we were gone for 2 weeks. We took a week off for Thanksgiving, and I forgot to cover 2 weeks of content for that. And so I decided I'm not going to throw in the whole other week of stuff that's already out by the time we're recording this, but I'm just going to put in the stuff that was coming out that Friday to start off this list. So it goes a little bit longer. It goes Friday to Friday instead of like Saturday to Friday. And so the first thing we have on here on Friday, December 1st, December comes to Netflix. This is like a school teacher scandal movie. It's basically about like, typical situation you hear about in the news all the time about a female teacher having an affair with a student or something. Except in this story, it's like that story is being revisited as like they're going to make like a movie about it, and it starts to like re-bring up all these old scars and cause all sorts of issues. Premise-wise alone, it doesn't sound like it's a super crazy interesting thing, but people have been chatting about this like crazy on like Twitter and other social media networks talking about this movie. So it's apparently very good, and it is coming on December 1st to Netflix. Then also on Friday, December 1st, Dragon Quest Monster: The Dark Prince is coming to the Nintendo Switch. SteamWorld Build is coming to PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Switch. And Godzilla -1 is coming to movie theaters as well on Friday, December 1st. That's an interesting one because it's supposed to be like post-World War II Japan. Like they're not trying to do it modern like they're doing it. It's supposed to be following the devastation of World War II. And then like Godzilla shows up too to like just kind of like wipe the slate permanently clean, you know, after everything else that's happened. Then on Saturday, December 2nd, Doctor Who Wild Blue Yonder comes to Disney Plus, which is the new home for Doctor Who. That's a special. They're doing a number of specials with David Tennant reprising his role as the 10th Doctor, and then they're going to move on to the next Doctor. But so this is one of the specials that's on Disney Plus now, which is, like I said again, the new home for Doctor Who. The Archies, which we've mentioned before, we talked about a trailer for it a while ago. It's like a Bollywood movie about Archie comics, is coming on Thursday, December 7th to Netflix. Leave the World Behind is a movie also coming to Netflix. We talked about this one as well. This is the one that's produced by the Obamas and created or directed and written. I think the screenplays and the direction are done by Sam Esmail of Mr. Robot. That is coming Friday, December 8th on Netflix. Merry Little Batman, the animated movie, is also coming on Friday, December 8th, but to Amazon Prime. That's like a weird thing that we're going to be seeing more of, I guess. It's a Batman property. You'd think it was going to be on Max, but no, it's on Amazon Prime because I guess Max decided not to do it and sold it to somebody else instead. So at least they didn't use it as a tax write-off. You can give it that at least. Also on Friday, December 8th, Mr. Monk's Last Case, which is also a movie, is coming to Peacock. This is a movie continuation of the Monk TV series. And we've talked about this kind of thing before. We talked about the trailer trailer for this before as well, about just the idea of all these things that are like picking up, doing like continuations of beloved properties and how that's becoming more and more common these days. And that one is coming out on Friday, December 8th to Peacock. Poor Things is coming on Friday, December 8th to theaters. That's just like a really weird, surrealistic movie. The Boy and the Heron is coming on Friday, December 8th to theaters as well. This is the next movie from Miyazaki. So, Hayao Miyazaki of Studio Ghibli. So yeah, a lot to look forward to there. And that is it. And that is it for our On the Horizon segment. And that brings us to On Beat. On Beat is our news segment. We have a few news stories to go over before we get to some trailers as well. First news story, David Zaslav is at it again as Max is now removing even more Looney Tunes content, just trying to wipe their catalog of all of their really important stuff.
It takes a lot of courage. David Zaslav is a true profile in courage.
Yeah, David Zaslav wouldn't even consider a headphone port.
This is shocking, but then you see like David Zaslav. I guess he was at he was at the New York Times Dealbook Summit where he said this. Okay, I'm looking at the thing. Which, by the way, unrelated, Elon Musk was also at the same summit and said some absolute batshit crazy shit. But that's a different podcast.
You just bring rich people together and they're gonna say a bunch of batshit crazy shit.
Yeah, but David Zaslav basically, he said, commenting on canceling films for tax write-offs, he just said, you have to like really have courage and that there are no sacred cows, and shit like that.
Yeah. Takes a ton of courage to cancel something that you didn't invest your life into. For a tax write-off that's like, putting a safety net there for yourself.
Right, really.
So much courage.
Yeah, so much courage.
Yeah, so brave. So brave.
This is just another aspect of that bravery. You have to have courage to get rid of the literal thing that put your studio on the map.
While screwing over all the people that work under you.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of courage to just be a complete villain and destroy people's lives.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, that's why I related, like, there have been increased calls from directors like Christopher Nolan and Guillermo del Toro saying to treasure physical media, because these streaming services, they could take anything away from you at any time. And this is proof. They're removing, the idea of like HBO's streaming, like Warner Brothers streaming service, not having Looney Tunes on it seems like batshit insane, but that is the reality that we're now facing. And so that should tell you, like, if you want continued access to Looney Tunes, you should really just own the cartoons on physical media at this point. Like, streaming is not going to be a forever reservoir for like the content you want to consume.
It should be, but unfortunately it won't, because there's lots of business fuckery that allows for moves that should not even be allowed by our government. Like getting tax write-offs for movies that are complete should not be a possibility.
You're right. Yeah, exactly.
Our next news story, Ralph Macchio and Jackie Chan put out a video announcing that they're making a new Karate Kid movie together. So Ralph Macchio, of course, being the titular Karate Kid from the original series and also continuing on through Cobra Kai, and Jackie Chan playing the Mr. Miyagi role, but like as a new character, like a different character in that world.
His character is Mr. Han. He was from the reboot with Jaden Smith, which was like, it was a reboot, but it was about like different characters. Jaden Smith wasn't just playing Ralph Macchio's character.
Yeah, he wasn't Daniel LaRusso.
Yeah, it was
Jackie Chan wasn't Mr. Miyagi.
Right, yeah. It was just the same
karate.
Yeah, they weren't doing karate. It was the same concept. They just switched it up to where, like, instead of a kid moving from the East Coast to the West Coast, Jaden Smith like literally moved from America to China.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess like they're going to somehow bring these two characters who are in completely different countries like together somehow, along with like a new Karate Kid who has not been cast. And they said like there's an open casting call for who's going to be like the Karate Kid in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Should be interesting. That's for sure. I honestly did not see this coming.
Yeah. So the other news we got from this is that Jonathan Entwistle, who did I Am Not Okay With This and The End of the Fucking World, which were two Netflix shows, he is going to be directing this movie. And Rob Liver, who is one of the writers on The Goldbergs, is going to be writing the movie. You had mentioned before we did the podcast that you read that the Cobra Kai showrunners are going to be involved as like consultants, although they're not directly involved in the writing of this movie.
Yeah, like I said, I think it was like either like Deadline or Variety, like did a piece on this, and they said the Cobra Kai showrunners have said they've seen scripts for this film, and they've been involved in like consulting. They've consulted on every draft of the script for this movie.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this could bring together how, if they're going to tie in Cobra Kai in some way, I can't imagine they're going to heavily tie in Cobra Kai. Like, I doubt we're going to see other characters from Cobra Kai, except for ones that maybe were in Karate Kid, like Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel's obviously going to be, I don't think Johnny's
I don't think we're going to have
this.
well, even if Johnny's in it, I doubt Miguel's going to be in it, or Hawk's going to be in it, or, other characters that are specific to Cobra Kai. I doubt any of them are going to be in it, which is kind of unfortunate. I think that would have been the better way, because Cobra Kai is actually really good.
Yes. I love it too, but if they're setting up like this new character to be a lead, there was a problem that like bringing in like some of the kids from Cobra Kai could like overshadow this new character, I guess. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
It made me a little nervous initially, because it really felt like they're setting this up like, oh yeah, well Cobra Kai's a thing and this is a separate thing and they're completely unrelated, and at least it sounds like there's some connective tissue. So that's good. Cause otherwise it would just feel really weird if Daniel's just like in a completely different place than we've seen him in with Cobra Kai. And I don't mean like a physical place. I mean like in his journey. Like if he's in a completely different place than he was with everything else, it would just feel very strange. With Cobra Kai still going, like we still have another season of Cobra Kai coming. Yeah, but you mentioned season. How are they going to bring them together? That since the last season of Cobra Kai was setting up this international tournament, that could give some connection to allow the characters to meet each other if they were even working the hooks in before. Like I'm not expecting Jackie Chan to show up in Cobra Kai, but they could set up like relevant plot threads that might lead to that happening in the movie,
Oh yeah.
I don't know if they will, but they could. Next piece of news is that Robert Kirkman, the creator of the Walking Dead comic book, has leaked that Steven Yeun, who was in the Walking Dead, and he's also in Invincible. Steven Yeun is also the lead character in Invincible, which is another Robert Kirkman property. But Robert Kirkman has leaked that Steven Yeun will be playing Sentry in the MCU. This had been rumored before for this specific character and role and the actor, but we knew that Steven Yeun was in some kind of negotiations for some MCU.
we knew Steven Yeun was being cast for Thunderbolts. That's what we knew. I believe they announced it, actually. I think they announced like they cast him in Thunderbolts in a mystery role, and this appears to be that role.
Yeah. So it looks like Sentry is going to be joining the MCU in Thunderbolts. It's a leak, so take it with a grain of salt, I guess. But it's Robert Kirkman. That's not just some rando on the internet.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, what does Robert Kirkman have to gain from like lying about this on a podcast? Right, stuff he shouldn't be saying, but yeah.
I could very likely see it being something that he wasn't supposed to say, but he might not even know that he wasn't supposed to say anything. Right. Because he's busy with his own shit. Like
he's not involved with like Marvel at the moment. He I guess like he hasn't like signed anything or like been personally like told anything from Marvel.
Yeah, and I doubt he's sitting on the edge of his seat paying attention to every piece of news and rumor that comes out of the MCU.
This is just like what he picked up in his conversation with Steven Yeun, who's obviously playing the lead in in Robert Kirkman's animated series Invincible. So
Yeah, but that is exciting news. I love Steven Yeun. It'd be exciting to see Sentry, who's described as kind of like a schizophrenic Superman, is what I've heard.
Yeah. Like it's the character's interesting because he's like a Superman level character, but he's like schizophrenic, or like from what I understand, like he has like an alternate personality or like evil entity within him.
I've heard it's like one that's like split off from him or something. Like,
yeah, called
like
the
it's
Void.
a separate physical entity, even though it's still him or something. But yeah, that's exciting news. Gives us something to look forward to with Thunderbolts. Our next piece of news, another casting story, another comic book casting story. Nicholas Hoult, who was recently in Renfield, but I think a lot of people who would listen to our podcast would probably recognize him as Beast in the younger version X-Men movies. So like Days of Future Past and First Class and stuff.
Yeah, he's young Beast.
Yes. He has been cast as Lex Luthor in Superman Legacy.
Yes. Now, if you remember from like the casting gossip previously, he was on the short list for the role of Clark Kent Superman.
Mm-hmm.
He obviously did not get that part, but as often happens with these things, like actors, sometimes, like they'll go into a project and they'll read for like multiple parts. I guess like he wasn't the right fit for Superman, obviously, but like it appears James Gunn saw he was the right fit for Lex.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot like, I guess, Tom Hiddleston with Loki.
Yeah.
Where he had originally auditioned for Thor,
Right, yeah, exactly. And it's like, yeah, Tom Hiddleston would have made a terrible Thor, but he makes it a fantastic Loki, so.
Yeah. Our next news story is that Black Mirror has been renewed for a 7th season. This is kind of bittersweet news because I think with every season, Black Mirror is kind of denigrated a bit.
Oh, yeah.
I missed the old days of the first 2 seasons, but I'll still watch more Black Mirror.
Although the AI show, episode was weirdly prescient. And very soon, too,
But man, Black Mirror was a fantastic show. It's still good. I think it's still worth watching. It just isn't as strong as it was.
It's still good in spots. Yeah.
I still enjoyed the episode of Black Mirror from the last season that was the least Black Mirror was probably the best episode of the last season, which was that the Demon 79, I think it was called.
Oh yeah. The one which was it
was a great episode of television, but it just didn't feel like Black Mirror, but
no. Yeah, but they were very clearly they had different branding for that episode, and it was very clearly the intention was they were doing something different with it.
I think the best way to look at it is maybe think of Black Mirror like Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Where if you were really big into the early Final Fantasies, then the newer Final Fantasies that came on PlayStation are might not be your cup of tea. So to you, Final Fantasy might be dead, but the franchise is still existing with this other direction. And then now it's changed again. Final Fantasy has changed again. So even the people that liked it during the PlayStation era might not like this new one, that's but it's just still continuing on as almost just a different franchise with the same name, I think that Black Mirror is kind of becoming like that in a way. The general idea of Black Mirror is kind of gone, but the kind of general tone of Black Mirror can kind of still be picked up upon and other things can kind of be worked around from there.
I think it's just morphing into an anthology show. I guess it's not going to be beholden to the original premise.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, but still, I think it's better for Black Mirror to be in the world than not. Them making more Black Mirror, even if that Black Mirror is a little off from what I would have wanted from Black Mirror, from what I came to expect from Black Mirror, it's still good TV, for the most part. There's some stinkers in there too, but for the most part, it's still good TV.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it for our regular news stories, and we just have a few trailers to go over as well that came out. We got kind of 2 trailers, I think, for Ted that kind of give a better idea of what the actual Ted series is. I wasn't aware before that, the Ted series, which is a TV series spinoff of the movie, the 2 movies, the Ted movies that starred Mark Wahlberg and a teddy bear voiced by Seth MacFarlane. But now we're seeing this TV series. It takes place in the 90s, and it's about Mark Wahlberg's character when he was a teenager.
Yeah.
And his relationship with the teddy bear and everything.
His relationship and his relationship with his family and his schoolmates and stuff.
Yeah, the show looks Boston as hell.
It does.
It looks wicked Boston.
Wicked Boston. I gotta admit, the trailer didn't do anything for me. I just didn't think it was very funny. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of just casually watched some of the first Ted movie and not really anything else.
Normally, I normally love Seth MacFarlane stuff, his humor. A Million Ways to Die in the West is a hilarious movie.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely watch it. I really enjoyed the first Ted you know, like, I enjoyed Family Guy. I haven't watched it in a long ass time. So, like, I'm a fan. And I just watched this trailer and I'm like, these jokes aren't, like, that funny. Like, this is all kind of stale. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah, I think it might be a quality control issue.
Yeah, it might be.
You know, you make more stuff and you have, you know, you've already done stuff before. So you've already, you know, purged a lot of your jokes that you've built up. A lot of people, comedy writers, build up their jokes, the repertoire of jokes over a lifetime before they ever get a career, you know?
Right.
You burn through that in a couple of projects and then you have to kind of keep that flow up and it's hard.
It just seems like since this centers like around Mark Wahlberg's character as a teenager and like it centers around his family and stuff and it's got like an outrageous talking animal, it just seems like, oh yeah, this is just gonna be a live action version of Family Guy.
Kind of, yeah.
I don't know.
Boston as hell.
Yeah, it's Boston as hell, yes. Yeah.
Next trailer we got was for Justice League Crisis. This is a collection of movies. It's not one movie. It's several animated movies that I think are coming to straight to DVD or
trilogy.
Something. Or...
Yeah, it's straight to DVD. It's actually like connected to like the last three straight to DVD DC animated films they did, like War World and stuff like that. I guess this is like the conclusion to that story arc.
I think DC's animated stuff is pretty good quality wise, but it's kind of underrepresented and a lot of people just, you know, like don't even know how much of it's out there. It's like it's slipping releases on straight to DVD instead of to a streaming service where it's highlighted.
It should be highlighted. They should be highlighted on HBO Max, you know, like if somebody competent was running Warner Bros. Discovery, you know, like it would be. Yeah, they should. But I mean, these films have always been straight to video.
And they've always been pretty good too.
Them.
They're just they're hard to find and watch, you know.
Right? Yeah, exactly. This is obviously by title. This is adapting Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's gonna be 3 films because that is a massive story. So like, you can't really tell that in like one like animated film. Mm-hmm. So it's another adaptation of Crisis on Infinite Earths. If you're interested in that.
We got another trailer for Boy Swallows Universe. We reacted to, it was like a teaser trailer before, where we both kind of were talking about how like tonally it just looked really interesting. Like it had this very like kind of 80s coming of age vibe, and then it just suddenly started taking this dark turn at the end of the teaser. Here we kind of get an idea of what's actually going on. Like this is more of like a story trailer to kind of represent like what the actual story is. So it's not just like a bunch of tonal cues like the last one. I think I'm a little less interested in it since that might just speak to the quality of the last teaser of like how compelling that was as just like an idea. Whereas this is like, once I kind of know what's going on, it's a lot less compelling, but it still looks pretty good. I still like the visual aesthetic of it. And, I'm always down for stories where there's like Nazi villains and shit, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know. Boy Swallows Universe. Looking still okay.
Looks like kind of a weird movie, but yeah.
Yeah. Next up, we got a trailer for Society of the Snow. Now, did you ever watch, there was a movie that came out in the early 90s, I think around 93, 94, something like that, called Alive.
No.
And it was about a plane crash where the people that survived the plane crash, like they were up in the mountains and they had to resort to cannibalism to survive.
I didn't watch that.
And they were like a lacrosse team or a football or rugby team or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't watch that because that did not sound like a pleasant thing to watch. So
yeah, well, this is the same story. So this is a true story. This event happened, but Alive took a lot of liberties. It kind of made like all the characters like American basically, and they weren't, and they just did a lot of like changes for dramatic effect and stuff.
What a shock!
This is like a much more like loyal to what actually happened adaptation of the same story. So if you've watched Alive, you probably like watch a trailer for this and get a lot of like, you know, flashbacks like, oh wait, this looks like this other thing I've seen before or something. But it's because it's based on the same story. It's just that this is a much more apparently accurate telling of that story as opposed to what we got with Alive. So
or as accurate as like, you know, like a movie is going to be.
Yeah.
Because you know, movies like are not documentaries. So they will a movie will like bend the truth. You know, if they're basing it off a true story, they will bend the truth if it makes it more entertaining.
Yeah, this one's not a Hollywood movie though, so it doesn't have that kind of agenda of homogenizing everything kind of that people are concerned when they think about Hollywood movies, you know.
Right.
So it should be a lot more on board with that. And I think, you know, like just in general, the fact that they like turned the team, like I think Ethan Hawke was the lead in Alive. And it's like, this is not like an American team. Like the people that crashed, they're not Americans. They were like, you know, Europeans.
Right. Yeah.
They weren't English speakers, you know, like, but that was all changed, with Alive. And here it's, at least that's more accurate already. But that is it for our trailers, and that is it for our on-beat section, and that leaves only full spoilers. This week on Full Spoilers, as I mentioned before, we are going to be discussing Pluto. Now, we mentioned this when we've talked about this show, when we talked about trailers for it, and we talked last week about this show coming up. But here's basically the spiel you need to know about Pluto. Pluto is based on the manga of the same name by Naoki Arasawa, who wrote Monster and 20th Century Boys, two absolute manga classics. Monster is also considered one of the best anime of all time, the adaptation. So there you go, right off the bat. But on top of that, this isn't just based on a manga by this guy, by Urasawa. The manga itself, Pluto, was based on Astro-Boy by the father of manga, Asuma Tezuka, who did Blackjack and Phoenix and Kimba the White Lion. You know the Lion King?
Well, he's
the thing that the Lion King ripped off.
He's considered the father of modern anime.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
And Astro-Boy is his most, like, famous property.
Yeah. Astro-Boy is like a cultural icon in Japan.
And Pluto is basically taking like what was like a 2-episode arc from the original anime series. I'm not sure how long it was in the manga, in the original manga, but it was a very short
probably
arc.
Longer in the manga,
Still short though. It was a short arc, and it's being really kind of stretched out and given a lot more depth by Urasawa, who that's what he's good at. He's really good at like making really deep, profound psychological stories. And so he's basically taken this like story from Astro Boy and said, okay, there's a lot more that can be done here. And there's a lot more you can read into, and there's a lot more depth that can be brought in. And that's what he did with Pluto. So Pluto, beloved manga series in its own right. Now it has an anime. It's on Netflix, and it is fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. Urasawa, he did this because like Astro Boy, especially like the arc, the Greatest Robot on Earth arc, was like his favorite arc. He said he had deep fondness for Astro Boy, and he originally wanted to do a one-off Astro Boy manga for the character's birthday on April 7th, 2003. But he decided to expand it. A lot of interesting things.
But yeah, so this was a much in-demand adaptation. People were really excited about this coming, not only because of how important Astro Boy is to anime, but also how important Urasawa is to manga and to anime adaptations of manga. Like I mentioned, Monster, 20th Century Boys, being some of his works. He's a very award-winning mangaka. And so like him being involved in something like Astro Boy, which is like kind of the source of modern manga, I guess you could say. Manga existed before Tezuka, I should say. Yeah, he's considered the father of because he kind of established the rules of like how manga is presented and how it looks and how it's written even. Like the whole idea of like it being this kind of singular author that's bringing you the story and stuff, as opposed to like the way a lot of Western comics is. A lot of that is credited to Tezuka.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, Urasawa said people like consider Pluto like a dark reimagining. And he says like, and he says like, to him, when he reads Astro Boy, he doesn't see like a wholesome, kids anime or manga for kids. He says Tezuka's work is naturally dark on a deeper level.
Yeah.
He says the darkness, like to him, like the darkness he infused in Pluto was naturally there in the original work.
He just brought to the forefront. The darkness was kind of in the periphery, and he kind of brought it to the front.
Yeah.
And told a really interesting story about robotics and artificial intelligence that centers around the character of Gesick, who is a German robot detective.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the trick behind this, and what makes this unique is like he took the story and he shifted the perspective or the focus away from like Adam to like Gesicht.
Yeah.
As like the main protagonist.
Yeah, and they were able to do a few interesting things with that. For one, they were able to take an Astro-Boy story and turn it into like a hard-boiled detective story.
Yeah.
Which is like the first thing they did that was like really interesting. And the other thing they were able to do is that they were able to play around with the fates of characters. Because, again, we're in full spoilers now. Yeah. Gesick dies like in the 6th episode.
Yeah, in the 6th episode. After following him as the main protagonist. Yeah, he just gets murked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Adam dies before that, but Adam comes back. Gesick's gone.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, Adam dies in like this shocking thing, but he's gonna come back because like he's Adam, like
yeah.
He doesn't die. But like again, like the way they do it, like this is like, I'm just gonna say this show is a masterpiece. Like this manga is a masterpiece. The way they do it is like they don't do it like any trite way. They have like the most brilliant scientist in the world, and they have like this whole thing where they can like they're bringing him back, but like he has this idea like to make the ultimate robot, like they have to infuse like like all these personalities in him, and then he says, like the robot has to choose a personality, but he can't, and so like he's in like a forever coma unless we like stimulate him with like negative emotions.
Yeah, unbalanced emotions, I think is what
unbalanced emotions. Yeah, and that forces him to choose an identity.
Mm-hmm.
And they do that with Adam, and like it's very tense because like there's all this, like he's gonna come back, but like we don't know what he's gonna come back as,
Yeah,
and then, like
they do a lot of good work with just these kind of subtle moments of fear and of just tension of like what's going to happen and stuff. And I think the first one I really noticed that was extremely well done was our introduction to who is essentially the villain of the story, Professor Abula, where they have this whole thing where Adam and his sister, I think, I'm not sure, was his sister with him? But Adam's leaving this police
his
station.
sister was with him.
Yeah.
At the police station? Yeah.
And they're leaving the police station and they have these two separate entry-exit ways. One is for humans and one is for robots. And as Adam's going through, he sees this other guy going through, and there's all this setup like, oh, there's this very important person and he's showing up, and like, oh, it's gonna be him, and you're like, okay, so it keeps cutting to this guy and he's approaching the police station. It's like, okay. And then Adam like sees him and immediately knows something's like off.
Yeah.
And there's like a kind of a tense moment there, and it's just they did such a good job of like instilling that moment with like a sense of existential dread at the moment you're meeting this character who is like I said, essentially the villain of the story.
Yeah, he's one of the villains. There's one thing which I don't get, like, there's like a main villain introduced in episode 5? At the end of like episode 5, it's like this teddy bear who's like the mastermind behind everything. And he just like shows up out of nowhere, and then like
Dr. Roosevelt.
Oh, is that the name of it? Yeah, Dr. Roosevelt.
A powerful sentient, like the description says, a powerful sentient supercomputer belonging to the United States of Thracia, and he takes the form of the teddy bear.
Yeah, and he's like controlling or blackmailing the president of the United States of Thracia, and the whole thing with Abdullah and stuff is like all part of like his plan. Like he's been like orchestrating everything the whole time. That
we don't know how much he's orchestrating and how much he's being opportunistic.
Yeah.
I don't think he planned the whole thing. I think he like saw the opportunity and helped it along,
Right.
I think the real thing started because of Abula, who we find out, like, the Professor Abula that we see in the series isn't even Professor Abula. He's dead. He's Goji, this, like, robot that is the most advanced robot that was created by Astro-Boy's creator, Adam's creator, Professor Tenma, as like a project. He did it for like Abula, and it didn't wake up because it only had all those the information, like we said, but it didn't have the unbalanced emotions to like force it out of its own coma.
Yeah.
And that's introduced with like Abula's hatred basically after he died. And it's given to him on like a chip. And Tenma uses that to like wake up Goji, who then takes the form of Abula. So Abula's been dead the entire time.
Right, yeah, we find that out at the end. Like that's like the big twist. And Goji is like very much Dr. Tenma's failure. Because Goji is like the monster that when they're doing a similar thing to Adam to wake him up, they're on a knife's edge hoping Adam doesn't wake up to be the same monster Goji became.
Thankfully, Adam was woken up with Gisic's memory chip, and Gisic's last thought wasn't of like vengeance or anger at his death, but at like how just the fact of recognizing in his death, he recognized that anger doesn't come to anything. And that moment when he recognized that being imprinted in his death, when that was implanted in Adam, that allowed Adam to not turn into like a vengeful monster.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think another thing that's really interesting that this series does on like several occasions is it kind of spells out, it like over spells out something to you over like the course of like multiple episodes. And it's like preparing you for when it's going to happen. It's like a kind of foreshadowing, but it's even more direct than foreshadowing. And they set it up kind of like in advance. So you get these certain terms kind of stuck in your head as you're watching the show. And then when it starts to come into fruition, it's like, yeah, okay, I was well prepared for this. Like I was set up to understand this before it happened. And that allowed when something kind of abstract happened for me to follow it. Like they didn't just go, okay, Adam suddenly has like these unbalanced emotions attached to him and this is going to allow him to wake up, but who is he going to become? Like that concept isn't just like told to us at the moment that happens. It's like teased throughout like the entire series. The concept of like unbalanced emotions being able to wake up a robot from like a state of like slumber because it has too many calculations and can't find its route. That's like set up multiple times. You hear the term unbalanced emotions over and over again in the series. Almost every time Tenma's on screen, for example, something comes up about unbalanced emotions and what that means, So there's a lot of moments like that throughout the series where it's like, okay, it's like I'm hearing this thing a lot. It's setting me up for something. And then when it comes, it can bring like a really abstract and detailed idea without kind of throwing you off the deep end because you've already been kind of conditioned to understand the basic concept that they're going for.
Right, yeah, exactly.
I think that's a clever aspect of the series. I think they covered a lot of different angles of the kind of the concept story of artificial intelligence and kind of the broader concepts of that. I think they handled it from a lot of different directions in a really cool way. I'd say like my reaction initially watching Pluto is that like the first episode really didn't do it that much for me.
Oh, really?
A lot of the first the first episode is like really almost like 2 episodes.
Yes,
like, it's kind of like 2 episodes smashed together kind of, where the other ones feel a bit more concrete as like solid episodes by themselves.
It's interesting because like, yeah, the rest of the series doesn't really do what they do in like episode 1 because yeah, the episode 1 introduces like the central conceit, like a powerful robot has just been like murdered by a mysterious force and so has like a human like, involved in robotics. And these murders seem to link back to like a war in like
war in Asia.
Yeah, in Asia and it's a mystery, and it kind of like draws you into that right away. And then like you get the second half of the episode where it focuses entirely on this robotic butler and like the man that he's there to serve, who doesn't want him around, hates robots, is like very grumpy. And then like it goes into like this man's history and like we learn more about this robot and like the robot, like he wants to play piano.
It like almost feels self-contained.
Yeah, it seems to have like nothing to do with the first half.
Except the same war. That's basically it.
Yes. Except
the same war is in the background and that's it.
Yeah. And and that's the connective tissue. And then like at the end of that storyline, this robot, which I believe like, what was his name?
North number 2.
Yeah, North number 2. Yeah, this robot butler who was one of the key fighters in the Central Asian War, the same threat that had just killed Mont Blanc at the beginning of the episode, shows up and he fights it and he dies.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's the connection. And you might think like, oh yeah, well, what was like all that? But I kind of think of it as like a way as, oh, interesting. So like, they actually like gave us time to like spend some time with this robot and learn about him and sympathize with him and his feelings before we went off and killed him. Instead of just having like him die and like have a news report said North number 2, like the most beloved robot butler in the world just died. You know, like it has more impact.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like that's what I'm saying. Like when I say it didn't grab me like on the first episode so much, I enjoyed that part of the episode a lot more than the kind of setup at the beginning of the first episode. But right. A lot of the tricks that made it really good, like the series really good, I think that had to do with the investigation side of things and Gesick and all that stuff wasn't really as prominent in the first episode as it was in episodes that followed. But that robot butler thing was very good and very entertaining and very emotionally relevant, you know, and strong and like a way that gets you really attached. And I think it was a kind of a clever idea the way it was presented. It's just that it was a weird first episode because you're introduced to like the concepts of things. It's not really super compelling yet. And then all of a sudden you have the side story and the side story is really good.
Yeah.
And then I think the aspects of the mystery that were more interesting and the things that became more interesting started happening in like episode 2 and episode 3. You know, like as it progressed, it just kept getting like that aspect of the story just kept getting better and better and better, more interesting and more interesting with each moment. We got to meet, Adam. That was like kind of an exciting moment and just the way you see like, and I think that works as well as like something that follows meeting North number 2. I think if we had met Adam first, it might not have had the impact as having met him after North 2.
Yeah, because we meet Adam at the end of episode 1.
Yeah, at the very end. Like, we don't even really meet him. We just see him, you know? Like,
right, yeah.
That's pretty much it. It's just like, oh, here's Adam. That's it, you know? But I think that you need the setup of like the emotional side of a robot story like this. And you needed that through North number 2 because Gesick, he doesn't really convey a lot of emotion.
He's like
he conveys anger, which is interesting for a robot.
He's more of a stoic figure, you know. Yeah. Like we even see like with his life, you know, with his domestic life with his wife.
They're both like, very quiet and reserved, and
they're both like very stoic. Like he's very stoic, you know. So like we don't get like the broad range of emotions. This like North number 2, like the whole thing with them, it really cements the concept of robots are like beings with like a range of emotions and feelings too. They're not just machines.
Yeah, and they kind of slowly introduce that in a way that I think is important. Like, I think that's how it works. Like, I think you introduce Gesick because you have to introduce the plot and he's the central character, you know, to the play. He's the protagonist.
You have to introduce the plot, you know, you have to introduce like the story, which by the way, I say like, you know, we do start the series with Mont Blanc being dead, you know, and it's kind of like, I go back to like North number 2 and how they humanized him. They do something in reverse with Mont Blanc where they humanize him by just showing like how much the world loved him and how he was like such a beloved. Again, they do it in such a good way.
Yeah, I think though if they didn't do North number 2, it wouldn't have the same impact because I think that like Mont Blanc's introduction and the way they do it in kind of hindsight of like being this beloved figure and stuff, it works to some extent, but it's also a bit of show don't tell, you know, like where they're telling instead of really showing like what made him special. And I think that it's strategic to like have that aspect to go, oh, okay, to understand that people love this guy and he's gone, and to kind of not fully grasp that, but have that, and then to cut from that to North number 2 so that we can start to understand like how robots process emotion and stuff, and how robots that were in this war, that these robots that were in this war, like I'll have like PTSD from the war, and like how that's affected them and changed them through the course of their lives. And it humanizes them and makes them these kind of like characters that we care about. So I think that like either one on their own doesn't really work. I think it's a really well thought out, plotted structure for this series to like introduce concepts and layers of concepts just like a little bit at a time. You introduce Gesek because you have to get all that information out, but you don't cheapen it by making him like, oh, he's really happy and having these very cheerful moments with his wife. It's like, no, he's kind of solemn and he's very stoic, like you said. And so it would be a disservice to his character to like make him not like that. But that means that it takes us longer to get into his headspace and to understand him. Right, we eventually do, but it takes longer to get there. And so that's why you cut away to like North number 2. So you can get like a more direct way of understanding that aspect of robots in the series. And then you start to get other things. So it kind of is like, in a way, it's almost like, oh, and here's another robot that we're going to set up, have killed, and then you're going to feel sad that they're dead. Because they do that a number of times. They introduce the character of Brando, who's like this fighting robot who has an adopted family, you know?
Yeah. Again, like the conceit is, and again, this was a storyline of the original arc in Astro-Boy, the conceit was like all these robots were involved in the Central Asian War. And we know like the villain Abdullah, who did end up being Abdullah, but he has like Abdullah's like personality and feelings. Wants revenge on these robots and like the people, like the humans who are like also involved. And so they're systematically killing them all one by one. And spoiler alert, like a number of like robots are introduced throughout this thing because like they're like all the robots, all the most powerful robots in the world. Mm-hmm. You know,
they're called like robots of like mass destruction. I think they refer to them as, and I think it's a little bit of a weird wording, robots of mass destruction, but I think it's very intentional. They're trying to play on the idea of weapons of mass destruction, of course, which is a known term that we have in our reality. The idea of like mutually assured destruction and of like these kind of things that could just bring death to us all. And I think that like referring to the robots in that way is a way of like going like, okay, viewer, you're watching this. I need to convey to you like how big of an ethical issue it is that these robots even exist.
Yeah.
Like what does that mean?
Of course, there's like a lot of stuff like obviously Tezuka borrowed like from Asimov for this because like they have the rule that no robot may kill a human. They are like literally incapable of doing that. So like when you say like the robots participated in the war, they literally only killed like enemy robots. Mm-hmm. They did not like kill humans, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and the idea of killing humans becomes a real central plot line to Gesek's story because you find out that he actually did kill a human and that his memory was erased. And there's hints of that building up to that, and then you get that like reveal. And
one other robot in this who has been revealed to have killed a human.
Rao 1589,
Yeah, that Gesek visits very early on in the series, you know, and it's kind of like...
He's kind of the Hannibal Lecter of the series. He's like the guy that gives advice to people that visit him in his confinement.
It's interesting because, you know, like we're introduced to this character, Brow 1589, and we're told, he's like the Hannibal. He's killed a human. He's one of like the only like robots that actually have killed a human, and he's in prison.
But when he's introduced to us, he is the only.
He is the only.
That's how we're told.
Yeah, that's how we're told. We're introduced. Gesek is talking to him, trying to get insight into this case, but we don't know the entire time that Gesek has also killed a human.
Mm-hmm. And Gesek doesn't know that either.
Right.
His memory's been wiped, and that comes down to like human greed. You know, the corporations, they put the money into him and they covered it up.
Yeah, because he's like one of the most advanced robots. He's like the best. He's an advanced weapon, and he's like one of the best investigators. The company has like a lot to gain from Gesek being Gesek, and something that memory could completely throw him off.
Yeah, it's a fascinating way they did the Gesek story because you're like, okay, something's up. His memories were tampered with. Something was going on here. Then you kind of get the idea, okay, he killed a guy. And then as it goes on, it's like, oh shit, he had like a robot kid that he doesn't remember. That because
there's
it was
this whole
wiped
thing
from his
like
memory.
where like there's this one character who's like the brother of the guy Gesek killed. You know, like
Adolf Haas. Great name they gave him.
Right, yeah. I believe Tezuka, originally wrote this stuff like not long after World War II. So like a name like Adolf would be like very fresh in like everybody's memory at that point.
Yeah. It's also a German character. It was a rather common German name before, not now.
Yeah, it was. I don't know like how much, like how it was like, if it was intentional on Tezuka's part. Could be. I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, he's a member of like an robot like hate group who wants to see robot destroyed, and like his hatred comes with the fact Gazette killed his brother. And it's interesting because the whole time like we're learning about this, we learn like his brother wasn't like a good person. Like they're saying like, oh, his brother committed unspeakable atrocities, and they keep saying that, but they're never specific with like what he did.
We get glimpses of the brother, but we don't really quite understand what it is he did that was so bad. Like he looked like a petty criminal kind of thing, but we don't really get the idea of like him being as bad as he's being made.
Well, when they talk about like what he did, it's like even like Adolf's wife is just like, oh, your brother was like the worst person to ever live.
Yeah, even he deserves to die,
Yeah, and so it's interesting, and you see that, and you find out he's been like, I guess, kidnapping and dismantling robot children for parts. I guess
he's like a child murderer, except for robots.
Yeah, except for murder. And
he's not doing it he's doing it for parts, but he's not doing it for parts in the way of like, oh, he's just doing it as a business thing. He's doing it because he's sadistic.
Right.
He's literally like, the parallel is he's literally a child murderer,
Right.
He gets some kind of sick, perverse pleasure out of it,
Yeah, and we find out during the war, Gazette is there in like a support capacity, because they want him to like blow up this place to get rid of like a bunch of debris and stuff.
I think you're mixing up there. That's Epsilon that had that.
Oh,
role.
That was Epsilon, yeah. Gazette finds like, or I guess like, they find like this robot child in the rubble.
Mm-hmm.
And
Gazette had saved a human child and returned it to its family. And in that moment, he had like this profound experience where he because the father had said like, I'll never let you go again or something to the son. And that like had some kind of profound effect on Gazette, like that concept.
Right.
Like had entered his head like a brain worm and was floating around in there rent-free in his brain. And then he was at the same scene where everything happened and happened to see like a robot child that was basically about to be destroyed because it was in really bad condition.
I'm confusing like two different things. Yeah.
You're mixing that up with the Epsilon story, which is like handling a different angle of the same kind of idea. But yeah, because of that, he encounters this robot child and decides to take it and to take care of it. And he tells his wife, and they proudly like repair it and are taking care of it and treating it like their child. And it has this like, it's what really gives you, that moment is what really gives you kind of a more insight into both Gazette and his wife and what their relationship is about and who they are and what they actually care about. So where they seemed a little cold and distant before and stuff, like you said, because they're portrayed very stoic, they are. Like that's the kind of moment where you kind of get like this representation of this thing that kind of allows you to understand them, And it's this robot child. This robot child is one of the victims of this child serial killer, this robot child serial killer.
And then Gazette is the detective assigned to the case of finding this guy. Like, he doesn't know at this point.
Yeah. It's almost 7S.
Yes.
Like the movie this is slight spoilers for the ending of the movie 7 that came out like 15, 20 years ago or whatever. There's a moment where Gazette gets like a phone call from like his wife, and it's kind of confusing. Like something's going on at home, and at the same time he's on this case and he's got this guy cornered, and he doesn't quite know like what exactly is going. It's kind of played up for confusion, so you don't really know what's happening. And then the moment drops where like the guy literally drops the bag of the child robot parts, and the head that comes out is when this first happens. By the way, we still don't fully know about like Gazette's child and stuff. Like we don't really know that, but it's like, I think that's kind of our first hint when you see that robot's head. Like Gazette knows who that is and freaks out, and then he kills the guy. That's how he was able to kill a human. He got a big dose of unbalanced emotions from an event,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And it allowed him to do that. And so there was like a lot going on there. I don't know where else to take the direction of the conversation.
I think we're getting the full circle where Yeah, that's kind of like after that revelation is kind of where Gazek's story ends, because we get that revelation, we get everything about it, and then Gazek gets killed.
Yeah, and it's because his weakness is exploited. They have like a crippled robot child kill him, basically.
Yeah. And it's it's kind of implied, that Roosevelt was behind Gazek's killing, because they had like the episode right before it happens, they have like Roosevelt like commenting on Gazek, saying like, some pretty ominous stuff about him. And then like after like they kill Gazek, it cuts back to Dr. Roosevelt kind of like commenting on Gazek's death.
Yeah, Dr. Roosevelt and President Alexander, who's the president of the United States of Thracia.
Yeah.
And the two of them are kind of like celebrating.
Yes.
The fruition of their plan.
Yeah, they're celebrating the death of all the great robots, and they're kind of like, oh yeah, like everything went to plan, and then they notice like Adam isn't like dead. Adam's coming back online.
Yeah, they did that. They did a good moment for that too. Like we talked about when Adam came back, it was kind of scary. It was like, okay, he could go this very dark path. The moment that Dr. Roosevelt like notices that Adam's back online, and you can like hear the fear in the voice of like, oh my God, like Adam's back and like is being held by an intense amount of hatred.
Yeah, there's suspense because he comes back and he seems like very unstable. And again, to tie it like around, it's really interesting because the way they do it is interesting because Adam is the main protagonist of Astro-Boy. He's in the original like manga and anime, he's the main protagonist in the story. They flip this for this adaptation by making Gazek the central focus and putting like Adam in the background for like the majority of it. But they do like an interesting thing with this where they reverse the flip by when they bring Adam back as the central protagonist at the end of the story, they do it by like reawakening him with like Gazek's memory chip. So it's kind of like Gazek's death like plays a key role in like Adam's rebirth. Yeah.
It's like Adam's final form is influenced by Gazek.
Yeah. Again, like, it's just beautiful, like, how this is designed and how everything flows into everything.
I think that's the best thing you can say about this series as a whole, is everything is so immaculately placed.
Yes.
Like, everything kind of has a purpose and it's there, and it builds, and it develops, and it sets everything into its course. And then these things, like I said, like I mentioned before, they do this thing where they will put this terminology in your head and just keep hitting that term over and over again to kind of get your brain ready for like a reveal that'll happen later. Like it's like, okay, we need you to understand this concept. So we're just going to keep hammering it on you over and over again, just constantly in different ways. And then when it happens, you're going to understand what's going on,
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's really clever in the way it does that throughout the series with like lots of different things. It's not like one thing that it does that with. It does that with a lot of things. It's just very well thought out.
So, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's fucking great. I mean, I watch a lot more anime than you, so it's hard for me to like think of it in a sense of, is this one of the greatest anime of all time? Because there's a lot that are really, really fucking good. But it's, I think, easily the best of the year that I've seen.
Yeah.
If nothing else.
Again, like, I don't watch a lot of anime. And, I came into this, like, not really knowing, like, the reputation, like, this already had, like, as a manga, so, like, I watch, and I told you, like, after I watched the first episode, I said, I feel like I just watched one of the all-time classic anime. People in the future, when they're putting together lists or recommendations, this is going to be one of the top recommended.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, Urasawa, the guy that created the Pluto manga, he did the series Monster, which is, if you watch or read a bunch of articles about what are the best anime of all time, pretty much every single one, Monster is going to be somewhere in like the top 3.
Yeah.
Like, and that's kind of where the steam is held in.
Came to that assessment only after watching the first episode, and having watched the entire thing, that has not changed. I think this is an instant classic.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know if you'd ever get around to this because it's a lot to read and it's manga, not anime, but I highly recommend to you 20th Century Boys.
Okay.
Which is a series done by Urasawa, and I think it's his best series, and it's very Stephen King. Like it very much has like a Stephen King vibe to it, but like from Urasawa's perspective, kind of, you know. But it's got that like, you know, coming of age like kids, and then like stuff that affects those kids when they're older, and like that same kind of thing that you get in like good Stephen King stories, you know. It's in place in 20th Century Boys. Like it's very much that. Yeah, Pluto is great. I hope we get more like really strong anime from Netflix. It seems like a lot of the anime that Netflix has done has been like either Western anime stuff like the Castlevania series, or it's like they just licensed something that was going to come out anyways, and it was going to be simulcast, but now you have to wait for the whole series to conclude, and then they put it up on Netflix all at once. And they haven't really done like a lot of really strong strides towards like really good anime content, unless you count like Western stuff, like I said, like Arcane and stuff as an example. But they did Cyberpunk Edge Runners, which was fantastic. And now they've done Pluto, which is fantastic. And I want to see Netflix do more stuff like this, where they break rules. Because one of the things about Pluto that's like really interesting, it's hour-long episodes. It's not pretending to be some, you know, regular show that like regular anime that everybody typically watches, where it's these 20-minute episodes, and every episode has like a 2-minute long intro song and animated thing that like introduces you to the concepts of the series, and then a 2-minute long ending thing in every episode. Like that's not here. Like Pluto doesn't have that at all. Like Pluto's like its opening is almost like the Marvel opening with the comic book pages. It's almost like just that. That's like pretty much what it is. It's like just comic book panels behind the logo that says Pluto, and that's the opening for every episode of Pluto.
Right, yeah, exactly.
It's not like anything beyond that. And then what you get is like it's treated in the same way that you would treat like an hour-long drama on Netflix, you know, where you get like an episode and it has this impact and it's a full hour. It's not treated like, oh, we have to make this 20 minutes so people can, their attention span can follow it and stuff. None of that is in place here. And that's breaking a lot of rules for the way anime is usually done. So I really want to see Netflix do more stuff like this, where they're doing anime, but they're doing it in a way that breaks the rules.
Yeah, know? Would be cool.
And I'd love to see them work with Urasawa again. I'd love to see him do maybe 20th Century Boys. Like I mentioned, that had a movie adaptation, but it never had an anime adaptation. I'd love to see that.
That'd be interesting, yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe another Tezuka thing. Maybe he gives Blackjack.
Maybe.
There's other stuff he's done that's good too, so yeah. But that's it, right? That's it for Full Spoilers and for our show. So Thank you everybody for listening. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at VoxelHero. You can check out our website, thetotalscreen.com. If you go to our website and open up a container story for any of the podcast episodes, scroll down to that last paragraph. You're going to find all of the relevant links you need to our RSS feed, our social accounts. Everything's there that you might need to stay connected to this podcast. You can also subscribe to this podcast through your favorite podcast client of choice, like Apple Podcast or Pocket Cast. Just look us up, OnScreen Podcast, and you should be able to find us. So check that out. And you can find the entire backlog of our podcast, because our RSS feed only has like the 2 or 3 most recent episodes. But the entire backlog of our podcast is on our YouTube channel, so you can go all the way back to episode 1 of OnScreen. You can go back to the podcast we had before this. We did 300 episodes of a podcast called The Weekly Set. You can go back and listen to all that if you want to. Or find ones where we're talking about Game of Thrones, or find ones where we're talking about Hannibal. You can watch those. Whatever you're interested in, you can check out there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the On-Screen Podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.